Can you hear my ice munching?
You're what?
I'm munching on some ice. Can you hear it?
No, I couldn't hear it. You said that as soon as I started recording.
Oh shit! Whoops.
You know what? We're just going to leave that in, actually. Welcome to the show. You are listening to episode 4 of the Bench Riders podcast. My name is Kadin, and I am joined as always by my loquacious co-host, Jesse. Today, we will talk about some old news, which, of course, is the Super Bowl, but it does... I lost the word. But we have announcements regarding the outcome of the event that it pertains to us. We will also talk about the NFL awards winners, specifically the MVP, and we'll probably debate about that. And then we will deep dive into the Aaron Rodgers Jets saga, as that is a huge mess, and it was announced last Thursday that Rodgers would not be returning to the Jets in 2025. By the way, did you like that I described you as loquacious?
I have no idea what that means.
I figured you wouldn't. It's not even true. It basically means you talk a lot. Yeah. So I thought that would just be kind of a funny thing to call a podcast host, but
I see.
it's just not accurate, but it works. So before we get into any of this, though, I have a very important story to tell. On last Friday, for the first time in my life, where I wasn't forced to, I actually went to the gym. And yeah, and this is a turning point. I looked into my bathroom mirror Friday morning, thought I looked like shit, and then I'm reading an autobiography on Theodore Roosevelt, and he talked about exercising all the time, and he is like the greatest man that ever manned, so I wanted to follow in his footsteps. So I went to the gym on Friday in the cold Iowa blizzard. I marched a half mile from my apartment to the Ames Fitness Center. I go in, I get checked in and all that, and I set up my membership that's actually free with my apartment. So I do all that, I scan my card, and then I go into the locker room. And the first thing I see with my eyes is butt cheeks. There was a dude in there, a dude about my age. He was walking around the locker room naked with no clothes on.
Hell yeah.
Have you ever had that experience before?
No.
And that could mean either you walking around the locker room naked, or have you ever seen anyone naked?
Not fully nude. I've seen people in towels and during football and stuff, but that was about it.
Yeah. It's weird when it's funny. I have a very similar story to the one I'm about to tell. When I was a freshman in high school on the first day of basketball practice, there was like I don't know if he was a junior or senior. I didn't know who he was, but he was walking around the locker room butt-ass naked with no urgency to put his towel on whatsoever. So that's my memory from that. But yeah, I walk into the locker room. First thing I see is some very firm, manly cheeks. So,
Good for you.
yeah. And there was no urgency. So there were two benches. So the locker room's like split in half. There's a bench on one side, and then it's where the other side is where the naked guy was standing. And I didn't want to go where the naked guy was standing, but I'm such an introvert because there were 3 other people over on the other side. It felt like, okay, I don't know which would be weirder, for me to go on that side or to me to go where the naked guy is that's swinging his dick around. So I went to the side where the naked guy was swinging his dick around, just as an impulse decision. And again, same thing with like my freshman basketball story. There was no urgency from him to put his pants on. I swear he did everything but get dressed. And so that was a very unique experience to start off my my career in the gym. And my goal, though, silver lining, is that my goal has been to go every other day. And I've kind of done that. I went on Friday. I took the weekend off. I got stranded at my parents' house because, again, it was snowing like crazy out. But I went back on Monday, took yesterday off, and then today I went back again. So I'm on a roll. So
What's the location of this gym?
Carter, we're recording. Well, you may as well talk now since you joined. So, so if you're
be a background character, you know.
All right. Well, before I answer your question, I'm going to explain to our audience of 0 people what's going on. So we're in Discord right now, and we have a special server called Podcast Recording, where it's basically people aren't allowed to talk. But our friend Carter is in here with us, and yeah, he forgot that we were recording, and he just talked right now. So you can unmute yourself now.
He didn't forget. Trust me, he knew.
That is not how I expected this podcast to start out, Kate. You caught me off guard.
Listen, well, I watch a lot of podcasts where they just talk about random shit and they just make jokes.
Where they talk about some firm cheeks at the
Listen, as I mentioned before, we have 0 viewers on this podcast, and I want to attract
some viewers now. I bet you have some.
Yeah, we're gonna have some viewers now. I'm gonna clip this, and we're gonna title it "Kadin's Butt Cheek Story." So,
honestly,
what was that, Jesse?
I bet Dan will watch it.
I bet Dan would love that story.
Who the fuck is Dan?
Dan Gleesack.
His last name's
Dan?
I don't know who that is, and his last name's Gleesack.
Yeah, you don't know Dan Gleesack?
I don't know Dan Gleesack. No.
I bet you do.
Why would I know who that is?
You probably saw him at the gym.
Okay.
Spell it out, Caden.
I don't even know what to say. I'm honestly speechless right now. I don't.
Did you finally put it together?
Yeah. Anyways, moving to.
All right, I'm muted up.
Oh man. Okay. All right. Well, you got to meet Carter. Congratulations, or I'm sorry. I don't know. You can decide that. But to answer his question, since he, so rudely interrupted our podcast, the gym, I think I mentioned it already, it's a half mile from my apartment, so I'm just able to walk in there, freeze my tits off, but do what I got to do, and the walk-off actually helps when you run a bunch, so that's what I do. Anyways, I think it's time to move on to talking about the Super Bowl. I did not expect that this is where this podcast was headed. So, man, I am. let me get my shit together. I'm a little thrown off. So, the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. They decimated the Chiefs 44-20. However, who gives a fuck? Because we made predictions for this, and that's what we're here to talk about. And if you're new to this, which hopefully we finally get people to actually watch this shit, we predicted every NFL playoff game from the divisional round all the way to the Super Bowl. We were unable to predict Wild Card Weekend because this podcast actually didn't exist during Wild Card Weekend, but we did talk about the games on that first show. So before this game, when it comes to our predictions tally, I was up 4-2 on Jesse, but I decided to make a little wager with him to make it a little interesting. We had 1 point given for whoever picked the winner of this game, and then we had 2 more points. One is who would get the final score closer, I guess, who picked the final score closer. And then we had another point if you actually got the score dead on. And none of us were even close. So nobody got a point for the exact one. And man, I lost where I was. God damn. So Jesse, let's just move on here. Jesse picked the winner correctly, and I got the closest score prediction right. So each of us got 1 point, but of course none of us got the score right, and we weren't even close. Jesse predicted this to be 38-35, which would have been the same as the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And I said 31-23. So I won the predictions tally because my score wasn't within 3 points. It was within 8, even though it wasn't great. So I ended up winning 5-3. So what does this mean? It means that I bought Jesse a webcam. Now, I won the predictions total, so why am I buying him stuff? Well, it's because Jesse is a diehard, and I mean diehard, Chicago White Sox fan, and I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. I had a Cubs hat lying and waiting with Jesse's name on it. So when we record, are we recording on Sunday, or do we decide that later?
We can decide that later.
Okay, so we'll decide that later, but we're going to record sometime this weekend, and Jesse's going to put the Cubs hat on, and you will get to see it live and in living color, and it's going to be great. So just some quick Super Bowl news, because this is really old news. This happened a week and a half ago at this point. This was the highest watched Super Bowl of all time with 126 million viewers. Now, there was a figure that came out today. It was either yesterday or today. It had like 180 million. I think that was global. So I think the 126 was actually United States viewers, which is very impressive. And it beat out last year's, which had 123 million for the most watched Super Bowl of all time. So very impressive numbers. It looks like all the people on social media saying they were going to boycott the Super Bowl. I think that goes to show just how much of a minority those fans are. I mean, social media is on such a small scale compared to the country and just the rest of the world. So, Jesse, you watch this game. What are your thoughts on this one?
Honestly, it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I was just watching it to hopefully not see the Chiefs win. I got what I wanted. Eagles played amazing. Fucking Cooper Jean come out, pick 6 in the Super Bowl on his birthday. Defense was incredible, and they made Patrick Mahomes look mediocre at best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and listen, I'm going to Iowa State University right now. I live in Ames. I mentioned that earlier about my butt cheek story, but Cooper DeJean, of course, went to Iowa. But I'm going to be honest, I got pretty excited when he took that touchdown back. That was such a cool moment. In this game, the Chiefs were just completely overmatched. Mahomes was sacked 5 times, but was pressured seemingly every time he dropped back. Very reminiscent of the Super Bowl against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers back in 2021. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it looked damn near the same.
It did, except for I think the Eagles scored more points because if I remember correctly, the Chiefs' defense played pretty decent, and that's back, funny enough, when we all actually rooted for the Chiefs. So Saquon Barkley only rushed for 57 yards, but that didn't really matter because Jalen Hurts not only looked healthy, but he was incredible. He went 17 for 22 passing with 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, but pretty inconsequential in the end. He also ran for 72 yards on 11 carries and rushed for a touchdown. What are your thoughts on Jalen Hurts? Not only in this game, but like in general. What are your thoughts about him?
I've always thought he was kind of overhated. Everyone called him a system quarterback, and that could be the case. But I mean, he looked really good in the Super Bowl. He's looked really good since I think it was when was our last loss? Week 4.
It was a long ass time ago.
Yeah, he's looked like a good quarterback ever since. I've always liked him as a quarterback and always thought he was good. So my opinions haven't changed.
Yeah, he's absolutely a great story. In 2018, he was on Alabama. He was benched in the national championship in that game. Do you know who he was benched for? Just as a trivia question.
Tua Tagovailoa.
That is right. I remember watching that game live. That was pretty crazy. But I believe in that season, he stuck with Alabama. And Nick Saban decided to have both of them like play a half. So Tua would play the first half, and then Jalen Hurts would play the second half in those games. So two quarterback system thing they had going on. But then in the in the SEC championship game, Tua actually got hurt, so they put Jalen Hurts in the game, and he led a game-winning drive, and he won that game for him, and Alabama ended up going to the college football playoff because of that win. And I think a lot of that would ultimately lead to him transferring to Oklahoma for the 2019 season, where he balled out. I believe he finished top 5, maybe even top 3 in Heisman voting that year. Really good, and he earned himself a second-round draft pick. But as you were saying, I do believe he's overhated. I think a lot of that just has to do with the Eagles. The Eagles obviously have a lot of great talent, so that sort of leads people to think that he's a system quarterback, but I disagree. I've watched him since he was in college. I've seen how much talent the guy really has. He's just a very humble and very easy guy to root for. So since we praise Jalen Hurts a lot, let's get back to the Chiefs here. First of all, I was glad they lost. I thoroughly enjoyed watching them get blown out. But where do you think the Chiefs need to go from this point?
Honestly, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue for them. I think they're still going to be the same Chiefs next year. Maybe they step up their defense or change their offensive scheme when it comes to certain things. But I still think they're going to be a problem.
You know, the Chiefs, obviously the Chiefs' defense wasn't great in this game. It seemed like their game plan was just to stop Saquon Barkley and nothing else. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I mean, they did a good job of it.
I guess they did, but it was kind of a detriment to the secondary because they got torched by Jalen Hurts in this one. One of the things the Chiefs need to do that I'm surprised you didn't mention, they need to bolster their offensive line. That's what they did back in 2021 when they got decimated in the trenches by the Buccaneers. And I think they will. They're the Kansas City Chiefs. They have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time under center. There's going to be free agent talent that wants to play there. And obviously, they wouldn't be where they are without being a great organization and having a great front office. So I think they'll figure it out in this aspect, and I do think they will be back. And you can like that, you can not like that, but I think that's just how this is all going to end up, and Mahomes will probably end up getting more rings. So, again, you can be happy or sad about that. Do you have any more thoughts just on the Super Bowl in general, or any topics that ranged from the Super Bowl you want to get into?
I think we covered most everything that I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Do you want to talk about Kendrick Lamar, or can we just move on?
That's up to you. We can talk about him.
I mean, we can. Let's do it. So, I can't even fucking say his name. Kendrick Lamar performed at the halftime show. Got a lot of mixed opinions about his performance. Some people thought, man, it was just the worst performance of all time. People didn't really know his songs. They're not that popular, in the mainstream, which, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good point to make, especially when you're broadcasting to a very large audience of at least 126 million people, but probably a whole lot more. I don't know. What were your thoughts on just this halftime show?
I don't know many Kendrick songs, but, I mean, I thought it was pretty good. I'm not opposed to rap or anything like that. I knew a couple of them. It was not the worst I've seen. So
yeah, I thought it was okay. I mean, yeah, I didn't know a lot of the songs either. I knew "Humble." That's one of his big ones. I've heard that before, and then of course the Drake diss track, where he calls him a pedophile, which is that was probably the most newsworthy thing to come out of this Super Bowl weekend, if we're being honest. But yeah, Kendrick Lamar, I thought the performance was okay. Definitely not one of the worst, though. I do disagree with that. No, do you remember who performed last year?
Last year was... Who was it?
Usher. It was Usher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Usher last year, honestly. So, even though he does have some really good songs, but I don't know. So anyways, moving on, we're going to talk about the NFL award winners, and I think this is going to be controversial because I disagree with the results, And the big one is that Josh Allen won MVP over Lamar Jackson. Now, I put the word deserved in a question mark in these notes. I obviously do think it's deserved. I mean, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for a while. But I don't believe, like, statistically, he was the best quarterback this year. Just for a stats comparison, Josh Allen threw for 3,731 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He also ran for 531 yards and 12 touchdowns. Now, and keep in mind, this is only counting the regular season because it's a regular season award. So very good numbers, but then, so I thought, okay, yeah, it was pretty deserved. And then I went and I looked at Lamar Jackson's numbers. He threw for 4,172 yards. He threw for 41 touchdowns. That is, let's see, math isn't my strong suit. 13 more touchdowns than Josh Allen, and he only threw 4 interceptions compared to Allen's 6. And then on the ground, he also outgained him. He ran for 915 yards and 8 less touchdowns. He ran for 4 touchdowns, but rushing touchdowns as a quarterback, who cares? So what do you think about this? Do you agree with the NFL in this decision, and why or why not?
I do and I don't on certain things. I do think, honestly, it should have went to Josh, mainly because he did it with less. He didn't have a super powerhouse running back. Yes, James Cook is very good, but he's not, obviously, Derrick Henry. He had a really young receiving core, and when he came up in big moments when he needed to. I think MVP is, a lot of people say it, treated as just a straight stat award. But I think in the situation they were in plays a big part of it too. Also, with, like you have in the notes, voter fatigue, with Lamar already having 2. And a lot of people went back to the last time Lamar won, and his stats weren't as good as some like Josh Allen's and Pat Mahomes and all that. And he still got the MVP over them. So I think it's kind of the same thing, just reversed. And now people are kind of pissed off about it. But then if you look back at the last one Lamar won, I think there was other people that could have deserved it as well.
Yeah, I think you make really good points there. I will push back on one thing you said, though. You talked about Derrick Henry being a powerhouse in the backfield. And yes, I agree. That obviously helps the Ravens' offense. Probably argue Lamar Jackson has a better line. But with the Derrick Henry point, Derrick Henry will score a lot of touchdowns. And I think the fact that Lamar was able to have these like crazy numbers with throwing for 41, and then he also ran for 950 yards. I just think these stats, even with like somebody like that in the backfield, is just very impressive, and I think that's very telling. And you also said, again, there's voter fatigue, and Lamar Jackson, yeah, you could argue that he shouldn't have won it last year, that there were other people more deserving of this. But I will say, I don't think we should be giving awards based on who should have won it last year, right? So they probably got it wrong, but I think they should just try and get it right every year and not give it to someone because, he doesn't have an MVP yet. We need to give Josh Allen the MVP. So I think the numbers difference is just kind of crazy between them. But I will say, when the playoffs started, that could have also. Do you think the playoffs could have had an impact on this too, in the game they played against each other?
It's a big possibility, yeah.
Because they don't vote on this until after the playoffs, but it's supposed to be a regular season award. So, honestly, they either need to start the voting sooner or they just need to count playoffs in it, which I wouldn't be against counting these playoff games for regular season awards, especially one like MVP where you're the most valuable player. That needs to be enhanced even more in the playoffs for you to be considered that. Would you agree that maybe that could be a change they could entertain?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it.
Yeah. So anyways, we debated a little bit. That was a nice conversation there. Let's see, where am I at? So other honors from this include Coach of the Year, Kevin O'Connell from the Vikings, Comeback Player of the Year, Joe Burrow, Offensive Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley. Shouldn't be any argument about that. Defensive Player of the Year, Patrick Surtain. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Jaden Daniels. And then Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I've only actually heard this guy's name a few times before, so I actually this one actually surprised me. Jared Verse for the Rams, which maybe I'm just a casual. But I don't know. Do you have any disagreements with any of these awards?
Not really. Really, the only thing I could see being a change is the defensive rookie of the year. I could almost see like Cooper being in there, but I mean, I don't really have any issues with how it is right now.
Yeah, I don't either. There's some obvious ones. So like offensive rookie of the year, Jaden Daniels. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Patrick Surtain's a stud. Defensive player of the year. Yeah, I'm cool with that one. Offensive player of the year is probably the most obvious one, Saquon Barkley. And then comeback player of the year, Joe Burrow. I don't know. I think Joe Flacco won that award last year. Joe Burrow, yeah, he did get injured in the middle of the year last year, and he came back, and he had a great statistical year. But unfortunately, the Bengals just weren't that good. They really let him down. So, yeah, I talked myself into agreeing with that one. And then Coach of the Year, Kevin O'Connell. This one I'm not sure about, just based on the way the Vikings season ended. But again, one of them was a playoff game, so these are regular season awards, so maybe I shouldn't take that into consideration. Do you think any other coach would be deserving of this over Kevin O'Connell?
I mean, yeah, one reason I think Kevin O'Connell did get it is because they were projected to be one of the worst in the NFC North.
Right.
And they ended up going, 14, and they won 14 games, right?
14-3 in the regular season.
Yeah. And, I mean, no one expected them to do that. A lot of people were saying it should have been like Dan Campbell or something, but, I mean, they were expected to be good. So I think that's a huge part of why it was Kevin O'Connell this year.
Yeah, and, yeah, you make some great points. I personally would have went with Dan Campbell, even though, like you said, the Lions were expected to be good, but they were really freaking good. They got the number 1 overall seed. My mic just fell down. And so... Man, I lose my train of thought so easily. So the Lions got the number 1 overall seed. They were the best team in the NFL. Personally, I think that means a lot more. Yeah, but I don't really have any arguments. Other than Sean McDermott, though, for the Bills. I mean, because like we talked about in the MVP conversation, that Josh Allen really didn't have a lot to work with. And sure, a lot of their success does fall on him. But the Bills were still a very good all-around team, even though they didn't have big names on it. So would you say that Sean McDermott maybe should have gotten this award instead?
I guess I haven't really put too much thought into that. I don't have a whole lot of stuff to say about it. But,
well, it's a podcast, Jesse. You're supposed to talk.
Well, that's just one thing I didn't look into much was Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, nobody does. I'm just kind of milking this, but
people expected the Bills to be somewhat decent, and Sean McDermott has always been a good coach. So I think he kind of just slid under the wayside.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point there. But yeah, I disagree. Also, another one I would think of, because they're all just coming to me now, is Dan Quinn of the Commanders.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but he didn't. Again, if the playoffs were to count towards this award, I think he should have won that unanimously. He took him to the NFC Championship game. So Dan Quinn's another one. So do you have any grievances with some of the other awards? Or I think I already asked that question.
I do not.
Okay, I definitely already asked that. Let's move on to Aaron Rodgers. So the New York Jets announced last Thursday that they are moving on from their, quotes, franchise quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers publicly has contemplated retiring from the NFL, and his level of play has certainly regressed since joining the Jets in 2023. And I'm a Packers fan, and as a Packers fan, I can say his regression really started in 2022. In a joint statement, new Jets head coach Aaron Glenn and new GM Darren Mogi said, "Last week we met with Aaron and shared that our intention was to move in a different direction at quarterback. It was important to have this discussion now to provide clarity, enable each of us the proper time to plan for our respective futures. We want to thank him for the leadership, passion, and dedication he brought to the organization and wish him success moving forward." End quote. So, in that meeting that Mogi referenced, According to The Athletic, the Jets were open to the idea of Rodgers returning for the upcoming season, but only if Rodgers agreed to their terms on what he can and can't do during his personal/professional life. These stipulations would have included that he would not be allowed to make any media appearances during the season that were outside of the NFL/Jets bubble, aka the Pat McAfee show. They also told Rodgers that he must attend all of the team's offseason workouts and practices, something he did not do in his first 2 years with the franchise. Rodgers will not be released until after June 1st. If he was released now, the Jets would have to eat $49 million of Rodgers' guaranteed salary for this upcoming season, but if they wait till after June 1st, it splits in half, so the cap hit would be spread out across 2 seasons instead. Much like any story involving Aaron Rodgers, this one is just filled with drama. Jesse, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think a lot of people saw it coming, honestly. The way they were talking on after the season, and I mean, Aaron, honestly, about halfway through the season, just didn't look like he wanted to be there anymore, really. I mean, I understand where he's coming from with them trying to put a leash on him and tell him what he can and can't do as an adult. I mean, yeah, I would say fuck that too. And I mean, I don't know. I'm stuck on if he's going to retire or not. I feel like he's going to try to get a couple more seasons out, but I think if he probably signs a one-year deal, sees how that goes, and then if that doesn't go the way he plans, I bet he retires.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you think he's going to go to the Vikings and complete the Brett Favre cycle?
It would be kind of funny, but
that would be fucking wild. So. That would be so fucking wild. I don't think it's going to happen either. But history has a funny way of repeating itself. So here are my thoughts on this one. As somebody who used to be an Aaron Rodgers dick sucker, I would say that, to your point, that he started to look miserable halfway through this season. I could argue that throughout his entire career, he's looked like he didn't want to be on the field based on his body language, and they always zoom in on his face, and he looks like he wants to kill himself. But Rodgers, I don't know. He did an interview after the Jets' last game with Pam Oliver, and it was very nice. He told her that he loves her and that he'll miss her and whatnot. But again, I think Aaron Rodgers just really likes the attention. He wants to drag this out as long as possible, and he wants to get the media. Even though he claims he hates the media, he sure does like when they talk about him. And I don't know. I don't know. I didn't really intend for this to turn into like a character discussion about Aaron Rodgers, but what do you think about his character? Do you think the media blows like the things he says and does out of proportion, or do you think he gets scrutinized because, well, he says those things and he does those things?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think a lot of it is him just trying to get his name out there again to get attention on himself for maybe an upcoming team or whatever it may be. But I also think they might take some stuff and twist it. Like the media does with a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, I feel the same way about that. I think it's a little bit of both here. So some possible teams for Rodgers to go to. We listed the Vikings already. And when I think about the NFL, I don't really see a lot of teams that are dying for a starting quarterback. One of them that comes to mind right away is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Rodgers has talked about actually a lot that he loves Mike Tomlin. He would love to play for Mike Tomlin. So that might be a fit. Do you have any other teams off the top of your head that need a quarterback that Rodgers could potentially have a career resurgence with?
The Cleveland Browns.
Well, they got Jameis though.
Did they re-sign him? I don't think they've re-signed him yet.
Oh, I didn't even know he was a free agent.
It was a one-year deal.
Oh.
You didn't see him walking around Louisiana?
Well, I saw him in. I saw him in New Orleans. I didn't know he was a free agent though.
He was going around asking all the players during the player interviews where he should sign.
Oh, I must have missed that part. I just saw him. I just saw him riding around on a bike. Yeah, so the Browns could be an interesting one. They're obviously having a quarterback fiasco. And what I will say about that signing is Rodgers can't be any worse than Deshaun Watson. There's no lawsuits against Aaron Rodgers, as far as we know. So yeah, that could be an interesting idea. So the Browns and Steelers, two AFC North teams, that could be an interesting one. Again, the Vikings are looking for a quarterback. That could be a potential option. Well, what about the Giants?
I don't know.
I mean, they don't have a quarterback. They got Tommy DeVito.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, they also have an early pick in the draft, so.
I mean, they do. I mean, yeah, they could draft a quarterback, but they can also assign Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play it much longer.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see what they do after the draft. See if they bring him in as like a mentor for him. I don't know.
Yeah. And then another team that I thought of, the Carolina Panthers. They do have Bryce Young, who actually started to show some serious potential towards the end of the season, so good for him. But maybe he could use a little more seasoning on the bench. You know, maybe they could bring in Rodgers for one year. I think that would be an interesting idea. So we'll see where this story goes, and of course, we'll cover it all here on the Bench Riders podcast because that's what we do. So some two other high-value players, I would argue much higher than Aaron Rodgers at this point in their careers, are Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel, two wide receivers. They are both on the market right now. The Rams were looking to trade Kupp, and then I believe Samuel just wants out of San Francisco. Each of them are coming off of lackluster seasons, but that is, you can point to injuries as the reason for that. What do you think are some potential landing spots for these two?
I would like to see Cooper Kupp go to the Houston Texans. We need receiver help after Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. We don't know what the situation with Diggs is yet, if we're going to re-sign him or not. Even if we do, Tank Dell's going to be out for a while, recovering from that leg injury, so we can still use the help. So, and Deebo, he's kind of just a diva, it seems like.
Yeah.
And I know so is Stephon Diggs, but I guess I would prefer to see Cooper Kupp out of the two. You know, he has that triple crown from a couple years ago, and I'd like to see Cooper Kupp go somewhere where he would get the ball a good amount and hopefully revive his career again.
Yeah, I think the Texans would be a great spot for Kupp. He would definitely get the ball a lot. So yeah, I think that's a good idea actually. Deebo Samuel, it's funny. I think he is the better of the two still at this point. I don't really know. A couple years ago it would have been Kupp, but I don't know. He's dealt with a lot more injuries. Honestly, I would like to see Deebo go to the Packers, even though he is sort of a locker room diva. He definitely is. He just kind of says just weird shit to the media a lot, especially about Brock Purdy, which I don't like, because nobody should talk crap about Brock Purdy, otherwise you should be in prison. But each of them are coming off a lackluster season. I do think Samuel, I believe he's younger. Honestly, they're probably about the same age, but I think Samuel is just the better talent, and I would actually like to see him on my team. Not really sure who's in the market for receiver. I go back to the Steelers. The Steelers always need receivers. Their offense stinks. So yeah, don't really have a whole lot of thoughts about this. And again, we are still very, very early into the NFL offseason. The Super Bowl just happened a week and a half ago. So I think one of the things we should look forward to here in the NFL would be the draft that's coming up. So yeah, these free agent signings and these trades, they'll probably be on the back burner for a while, at least until around April or May, probably. So let's get into our extras of the week. I'll go first. The Cubs made it official that their southpaw ace Shota Imanaga will pitch the opening two-game series in Japan against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Likely the first of the two. It actually was confirmed today that it will be the first one, and he will be going up against Yamamoto, a fellow Japanese pitcher. So that should be a pretty good matchup there. The series will take place in the Tokyo Dome on March 18th and March 19th. Last year, the series featured the Dodgers versus the San Diego Padres, with the two teams splitting 1-1. Kind of, I don't know, I was really searching for an extra of the week, but yours isn't too extensive either. So, yeah, let's just tell everyone yours.
I'm just excited that baseball's back, baby.
Yeah. Very.
Saturday spring training opens. White Sox versus Cubs.
Mhm.
About
Yeah.
the only part of the season that I like, because once we get to the regular season, we suck.
Yeah, and I think you told me the White Sox do really well in spring training.
They're not terrible. They're an above average team in spring training. But as soon as that regular season hits,
So, well, I think the reason why they do it too is because typically these teams will play their young guys, play their prospects, or guys these low tier free agent signings that they picked off the street, and they'd play them in these games. I think why the White Sox do so well in spring training is because that is their roster. Their roster is full of prospects and failed free agent signings.
well, they play a lot of their prospects, and I think another reason they do halfway decent is because these guys know that if they play well enough, they have a very good shot of making the team.
Oh, it's guaranteed. I mean,
Just 'cause we don't have a whole lot of talent on the team. It's not like spring training for the Dodgers where you're trying to compete against Shohei Ohtani and all them, and Mookie Betts and all that just to try to get a spot on the team. But when a situation like the White Sox, the young guys, if they play good enough, there's a good chance that they could be called up either at the start of the season or shortly after.
yeah, they won't have to wait long. One of the questions I actually thought of now that you said that is, if you were a young prospect, you were in AAA, would you rather be an affiliate for the White Sox where you could get called up at basically any moment? You can play spring training knowing that you're actively competing for a roster spot, or would you rather be in the farm system of the Dodgers might be an extreme example because they sign anyone who even breathes in free agency. But maybe, I don't know, just like an upper tier team like the Phillies, where, they have a loaded roster, so you might not get called up right away. But if you do, you'll be on a winning team. So which situation would you rather be in?
I think something like that, I don't know, it's tough because if you on a team like the White Sox and you do get called up and you do show out, the White Sox have a habit of taking their good players and getting them the fuck out of there for whatever reason instead of building around them. So it seems like a lot of players, because we had good players like Michael Kopech, Dylan Cease, they all went. Garrett Crochet, we traded Kopech in the middle of the season to the Dodgers. They won a World Series. Garrett Crochet stayed with us till the end of the season, but he's now with the Red Sox, who are looking to compete again. And Dylan Cease went to the Padres, who were in the playoffs too.
Yep.
So we had the building blocks, but for some reason, Jerry Reinsdorf and our GMs like to just ship them off, and it pisses me off.
I'm honestly, I know that would obviously frustrate you, but I'm happy that those guys who are super talented actually have the chance to win something now. I mean, don't you agree with that?
I mean, I get it. It just sucks as a fan.
Yeah, right. So, like Jesse mentioned, the Cubs will play the White Sox in the first spring training game on Saturday. He actually mentioned that to me before the show. I didn't even know about it. So, I think what we should do, we talked about this earlier, and again, if our schedules don't work out for some reason, we could obviously postpone this, but I think on Sunday we do the podcast, and then we actually review the game from Saturday, and we just talk about what we see. I think that would be a good way to do it, especially since there's no football anymore.
Yeah.
All right, so that is going to do it for our show. This was definitely the most unique podcast we ever done. Hopefully, our friend stays in timeout from now on. But I appreciate you guys listening so much. We are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, we are on Podbean, and I am working to get on Apple. The problem is they want my tax forms, and I don't know, I just haven't had time to do that yet. So we're getting there. Give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, give us a 5-star rating. Thank you for watching/listening, and we will see you next time.